Hey guys.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome back. I'm Josh Corum.
My name is Victoria Hartman.
And you're back with us on our Sex Nerd podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
It's been a little bit.
It's been 3 weeks.
Has it been 3 weeks?
It's been 3 weeks. Yeah.
We got a little busy last week.
We
It
did.
happens.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I talked about the last time how we were the look might change, and we have joyfully with us today our Emmy Award-winning film director Billy Ward, who is
Welcome,
helping
Billy.
us. Hi, Billy.
He's waving.
He's waving. So the look might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So what's up today?
Was busy.
Yeah.
I guess. I'm heading to Denver tomorrow.
Yeah.
For those who care, I play men's roller derby, which is not a very popular sport. And tomorrow I'm heading to Denver for the Men's Roller Derby Association Championships of 2019. I skate with LA's team. Actually, it's like LA and Bakersfield.
Nice.
Yeah. So heading up there. Yeah.
Cool.
So I've been, I did that whole blitzkrieg clean the house before you leave town thing today. Did everything, vacuum. I even swept and mopped the floor.
Wow.
No.
Oh, there goes our train.
I hear that train
The
a-coming.
train is
It's
a-coming.
rolling round the bend. And there it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
How are you? How are
Good. We're renovating our house finally. After me being in it 8 years. A 1980s built house is just a little outdated for my taste. So we're looking forward to wood floors and new paint, and it'll be nice. Yeah.
You don't like brown shag carpet?
No, and I don't like popcorn ceilings.
Popcorn
either.
ceilings.
Yeah. So
that's a thing here in Vegas. Is they love their popcorn ceilings.
Really? Still?
Actually, no, they don't, because I've seen advertisements on Zillow and stuff that said no popcorn ceilings.
Yeah. Yeah, we're looking to make sure. Yeah. I think the only thing we're not going to get done actually right now is our kitchen. But I installed a backsplash all by myself in the kitchen.
Well done.
Over the weekend. I was like, ooh. And I even did it with these nails. Not one broke. So, yes.
Oh, awesome.
So we have an interesting topic today.
We do. But first I want the people watching, we now have, we kind of are rocking these from the museum, our Sex Nerd T-shirts. And, the stickers and all that stuff. So if you're interested.
We still haven't gotten cups. I have a museum cup.
We need to make that official. So if someone were interested in getting a Sex Nerd shirt, does the museum ship them?
We can.
You can.
Yeah.
So how would they do that?
So we're in the process of redoing our website, the museum's website. So we haven't actually put the Sex Nerd shirts in our store yet, but we can until the website's done. So that's not really all that hard. We could do that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So I guess for now, if you want to get a Sex Nerd shirt or a sticker or a pin, you can go to eroticmuseumvegas.com. in about 2 weeks, and they'll be available there until the website gets revamped.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have our website, the Sex Nerd Pod website, is also getting revamped.
Okay.
I didn't consider putting a store up there, but it could always just link back to the museum's website.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with that. So. Yeah.
And what is the website for, or the link to our, so
our
URL.
Our URL is sexnerdpod.com.
Sexnerdpod.com.
Yeah.
That's where you can find us.
Yeah.
So today.
Yes.
Today we are going to be talking about this article that popped up.
Yep.
Actually, it was two of them. We found this journal or this journalistic article, I guess regular article there floating around the internet that talked about hypersexuality being connected to genetics. Like they found genes that that it's in our DNA, something like that.
Right.
So we went and found the journal article that it's based on, and I'm going to read this and butcher the hell out of it.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay.
This one is in Epigenetics. That's
Yes.
what the research is on. And
Right.
it's in the journal Epigenetics. It was published just this fall or just this summer.
Well,
Summer,
now
fall. Yeah, it
backtrack
just
for a
came out.
minute.
Yeah.
We actually discovered the journalistic article first, right?
No, I had found the
You found the actual journal paper first?
we will call it the press
The press,
article.
the press
Yes.
article, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
which led me to this.
Right.
The idea which led to this. So this is hypermethylation associated downregulation of microRNA 4456 in hypersexual disorder with putative influence on oxytocin signaling.
Ba, 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 ba.
A DNA methylation analysis of the miRNA genes.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But I want to contrast that with the press piece.
What was the press piece?
The press piece said scientists identify hormone potentially linked to hypersexual disorder.
Hormone.
Hormone.
It was a hormone, not DNA.
Hormone.
Hormone.
So that's an interesting difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Hormone.
Hormones. So I think you and I have commented on this before in
Yeah.
some of our other videos about science communication, adequate or accurate science communication, right?
Yes.
So
But let me interrupt.
okay.
A buddy of mine gave me a quote just the other day, and I think it's important to be relative for us diving into this because we are not geneticists.
We are not geneticists.
I am
no.
not a biological or a biology person, or even a medical professional.
Right, and I'm merely a neuroscience enthusiast. I mean, I would like to be proficient, but I'm still getting my feet wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the quote, my buddy said it was from Benjamin Franklin. I'm having trouble finding the quote, but it's this quote that's there's no man more ignorant than an educated man talking about something that he isn't educated in. So we're going to try not to sound ignorant,
right,
and realize that we're gonna dive into this article.
Yes.
We're not gonna talk about the genetics or the epigenetics.
Not so much.
That's so much.
No.
We are going to critique the other side of it.
Yeah.
The hypersexual disorder
Yes.
side of it.
Yeah.
But first, before we get in that, I need to talk about something.
Okay.
So I posted our podcast on my Facebook.
Yes.
And for those people who are just listening,
A lot of people just commented on your shirt.
They did. They commented on my shirt.
Yeah.
That it was too tight.
Oh.
Yeah, that they were
So
making.
you're wearing a tighter one today.
So I'm wearing a slightly tighter one today that you gave me.
Yeah.
My section.
Yeah.
That it was small. They were making fun of me shopping at the Baby
the
Gap.
haters can stop right now.
It's fine. One of them was actually my brother.
Yeah, I know.
Was he just jealous? You can't get the big pythons.
You're gonna get so much crap from him for this.
You have no idea. I'm sure. I'm sure. So especially wearing a slightly tighter shirt.
You can just tell him that it's sexy and he can hush up.
I'm just gonna come in wearing like a baby small one day. It just wraps around my neck. That's as far as it'll go.
A tank top. One of those like muscle tank tops, where it like goes underneath the nipple. And
and that's it.
Nice.
Yeah, or just have a shirt painted on.
That's even better. I like your thinking.
I can't help it.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway. So epigenetics. So this article was done in Sweden. Mm-hmm. So it was done Swedish respondents. It's a lot to unpack.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
No, it's very dense.
It's very dense, and reading it was very dense, and I had to Google several things.
Yeah, there's a lot of geneticist language. Genetics language in it.
I learned a lot about epigenetics, which sound really cool. Like the idea that your environment can impact these like genetic tags that cause genes to fire or not. So for those who listening at home that don't know what epigenetics are this idea, or
it's a modification of gene expression, of gene expression without changing the genes themselves.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So we're not changing genes, we're changing how they express themselves and how they affect the environment around them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was explained in a video that I watched. Maybe I'll find it so we can post it, that your DNA is the hardware.
That's right.
Right? The DNA is the hardware, and epigenetics is the software that can be modified to change how this gene is expressed or not in different ways.
Yes. So it either expresses itself more or it's suppressed.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And some of the arguments are saying that some of these epigenetics can actually be passed on, that maybe the tags don't fall off that we think. So which then gets into, all right, well, if I'm smoking and drinking and partying all the time, could some of those epigenetics be passed on to my offspring?
Curious.
Yeah. It's really interesting stuff.
Is this a new field?
No, relatively, I believe.
Okay. What is the difference between epigenetics and genetics? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to Google that.
We'll get back to you on that one.
We'll get back to you on that one. Okay. All right.
So in this article,
right,
there's a lot of things. So what we should do first is talk about let's talk about the press article. You have that.
Yes.
And then in kind of juxtaposition to this one.
Right.
There's some things, some red flags, and we can go back to what you were talking about as far as like science.
The importance of science communication.
Yeah, the importance of science communication.
And who might be better suited for what.
Yes.
Okay.
And like holding journalists responsible for writing schlock based on science that they don't understand.
Right, and asking questions. Are they writing it because it's going to get them clicks, or are they writing it because they have an interest in it, and how much do they know about what they're writing about?
Right.
Okay. So this was done in the, medical press. I haven't really looked into what the medical press is, to be quite honest, so whether or not it's legit. But what you take away from this article, because a lot of regular folks don't look at more likely, less likely, could mean, potentially. They don't look for those words. They look for more definitive words. So what you take away from this is so hypersexuality is genetic.
Yep.
In a nutshell.
Yep.
And they use words like alcohol dependent. What does that mean, alcohol dependent? Most people would think, so alcoholic.
Like an alcoholic.
Alcoholic, right? And they don't really go into details about how the article means by alcohol dependent and how they determine that, okay? And it also, the thing that doesn't use a lot of big words like methylation and undermethylation, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. Maybe I'm not. Methylated, yeah. So
I believe it's Michelin Man.
Michelin Man, okay. Okay. But so what you take away from this is, there seems to be a hormone that where hypersexuality comes from. Okay, we're not talking about hormones when we're talking about genetics entirely. We're talking about RNA and DNA and how it's expressed. Okay, so that's already an error.
Right.
And then it doesn't break down the sourcing of how the scientists are determining who they should be investigating and what kind of behaviors are manifesting, and what they tested to determine who's going to volunteer for this study anyway. So that's already a big difference between that and the study. I don't think it summarized it very well.
No. Additionally, the idea of hypersexuality, which I think we should define for people,
Yes.
this idea, so the hypersexuality disorder is in the DSM
Yes.
under
What is a
compulsive.
DSM for people that don't know what a DSM
It is the Diagnostic and Statistical
Manual.
Manual of Mental Disorders, something like that.
Something like that.
It's in the 5th edition. I think
Yeah.
they're working on the
It's
6th
the
edition.
5th edition, and it's basically what primarily psychologists, marriage and family therapists, and some licensed
A lot of mental health
mental
people
health
use
people
it as
use
their,
it as their diagnostic tool.
Right.
Right.
So when you go in and you
And there's
say,
codes attached to it. So when
Right.
you're like doing a diagnosis, you have to turn into insurance. There's a code.
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, when you go in for counseling
Yeah.
or something like that, and you say, I feel this, and this,
Right.
and it could be this.
They break
and
out their little
They
book.
break out their little book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So hypersexuality disorder
Yeah.
is essentially kind of a precursor, or in my opinion, the more medicalized form of sex addiction, or it leads to sex addiction.
Okay.
It's a compulsion.
Right. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a
I want to
compulsion
be really
disorder.
careful how we use sex addiction.
Right. I'm not promoting sex addiction at all.
Okay.
Like, I think
Because that's a big suitcase to unpack.
right.
Sex addiction.
I'm
right.
not but a lot of people will use this, I think,
Yes.
synonymously with sex addiction.
Right.
So it's this idea that you have impulse control or compulsions to go out and engage in risky sexual behavior, whatever that means.
Right.
That
So what is hypersexuality disorder according to the DSM?
according to the DSM,
Yeah.
is, well, let's see what they say.
Okay.
It's conceptualized as a non-paraphilic sexual behavior disorder with impulsivity content, and proposed as a diagnosis for the inclusion in the DSM. So it's just a classification of compulsive sexual behavior.
So okay. So how do they determine what's
Oh God.
okay? All right. Well, there we go.
So I feel like I want to wait on that because that's
Okay.
really part of my critique a lot of this.
Yep.
Well, I guess we could dive in. So
Okay. Okay. So we've already kind of broken down the difference between journalism
Yep.
and a scientific article.
Right.
Okay. Do we want to explore that, or do we want to go into the journal article itself?
We can go in the journal article, and then
Okay.
we'll come back to hypersexuality disorder. So
Okay.
this journal article is, like I said, it's very dense
Very dense.
and interesting to read.
Mm-hmm.
It basically recruited people who went, had a control group that were healthy, quote
Quote
unquote,
unquote healthy.
healthy, and then people who had gone into treatment or gone into looking for treatment for hypersexuality disorder
Okay.
or hypersexual disorder,
Okay.
who had self-identified. That's important.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
Self-identified.
Self-identified.
Okay.
I have this problem, or I think I have this problem, and I want to get treated. So then they volunteered to be in this study.
Right.
To find those who fit, they used different criteria, different, essentially, interviews, sort of assessments. They used the hypersexual disorder screening inventory, the sexual compulsivity scale, and the hypersexual disorder current assessment scale. Basically, these are interview questions, right? These are oftentimes a Likert scale. And a Likert scale is when you get asked a question and it's like 0 to 5,
Yeah.
0 being
More likely,
most
like,
likely,
right, yeah.
and 5 being not, or
Not at all.
unlikely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's one of those,
Okay.
and how likely they would be.
So these
to-
are psychological tests.
these are psychological tests,
Okay.
tested and just supported.
Okay. So in this test, these people saw a psychologist and had these tests assessed, or the geneticists did the assessments.
You know what it didn't say? It just said they were done. They were probably done by a psychologist.
Okay,
There
let's
were
just assume.
there were quite a few authors in this, and I would go through them, but I would butcher them terribly.
Yeah, there's a neuroscientist here, clinical sciences, psychiatry, andrology. Okay.
Yeah,
Sexual
so-
medicine. Okay.
Right. So there are some mental health people in here.
Okay.
So they probably were the ones administering the tests, or at least guiding the administration of the
assume.
test. Yeah.
Okay.
So then they would, they tested these individuals. so many people passed, and I believe it wound up being like 26 individuals or 28 or something like that. It was a small amount.
It was a small amount. Yeah, it was a small amount of people.
Yeah, after the inclusion steps, 83 subjects for the MIR 4456 were 55 hypersexual disordered folks and 28 healthy volunteers. And subjects, so they ran this through 2 tests, the MIR 4456 and the MIR 708, which I believe were just attempts to identify these, this hyper melanation effects.
Okay.
And then with the other one, it was 45 hypersexual disorder folks and 21 healthy volunteers.
So pretty low numbers.
It's pretty low numbers, but I mean,
it's still valid.
You can get some statistical power.
Okay.
The 20s of the healthy, the control group, that's a little low.
Okay.
So, but I mean,
right.
If you're just saying, hey, we found something interesting.
Now, are these 20 healthy people? Did they went through the same assessment tools? So they're not self-identified as hypersexual.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's how they're defining healthy. Someone who decides for themselves.
Well, So the healthy group, the control group, also none of these people on either side had drug or alcohol abuse issues.
Right.
They were in relatively same BMI range, same ages, even ethnicities. They tried to control for those, so they found similar people.
Right.
But I mean, you have almost twice as many hypersexual disordered folks than the others.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's still some similar similarities in their demography.
Okay.
So that's the sample. Yeah. And if we go any further into this, we're just going to sound bad. Because, I don't know. I mean, I know stats well enough, but I don't, the way they kind of display them and
it gets into a lot of like what kind of blood samples they took and how they process the blood samples and stuff like that.
And that's not our expertise.
That's not our expertise. Yeah.
That will really make us sound ignorant.
Right. And we want to be good science communicators, so we're not going to comment on something that we're not educated in.
So let's talk about, the whole point of this is looking at their use of these tools to identify hypersexuality, and then what actually are they finding?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So so this idea of hypersexuality again is I'm going to say it is morality disguised as science.
Right.
Because you have, one of the criteria that you have for hypersexuality disorder in the DSM is that over a period of at least 6 months, reoccurring and intense sexual fantasies, sexual urges, and sexual behavior and associated with, and it gives like a list of these 5 criteria. It had to be 4 out of 5.
Okay, what are the criteria?
Right. So one of them, the first one is really like screams at me. Excessive time is consumed by sexual fantasies and urges and by planning for and engaging in sexual behavior.
Okay, well, how are we defining excessive time?
Right.
So most folks, not all, but most folks, because it's evolutionary in terms of like perpetuating the species, think about sex often.
Yep.
Every day.
Right.
So how are you defining excessive?
Yeah, it's subjective, right? So a person like us, we probably think about sex more than the average person.
From morning till night.
Because it's our job.
Well, okay, but I don't want to sterilize it.
Well, no.
Also because we enjoy it as people.
Right, but sexual concepts, how's that?
Okay.
We think about sex and sexual concepts probably more than your average person.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think it's excessive.
Well, does it interfere with your life?
It is my life.
Okay, it is your life. Okay. Okay, good point.
Right?
Same.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then, I think it's so vague and ambiguous that, or nebulous more so, that, people, it could be anything. It could be you had a sexual thought today.
Yeah.
And you felt that was
excessive.
You
woke up you woke up aroused from a dream.
Yeah.
That that could be, and it was over in 15 minutes, but that 15 minutes was considered excessive by, there's no specific. There's no specificity in what excessive is.
Right.
Okay.
So the second one is repetitively engaging in these sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors in response to dysphoric mood states. Examples: anxiety, depression, okay. And then it goes on to say boredom and irritability.
A lot of people, I don't want to use the word escape, but a lot of people will deviate their thoughts from boredom to sex because why not?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I don't consider that.
I know a lot of people that get bored and masturbate. Like,
sure.
That's the thing to do.
Well, why not?
Yeah.
They're trying to define boredom, and thinking about sex when you're bored is pathological. Right. At least that's the way it's coming across.
Plus the idea of that you're, this idea of dysphoric state, that's assuming that you should always be in a euphoric state, or for the lack of a better term, phoric state. Just calm, I guess.
Right.
That that's not how humans typically are. You're up and down all day long.
I mean, there are some conditions where that is exaggerated.
Yes.
Okay. So, and they didn't have those people in this study.
No.
Okay, they eliminated, and I saw that in the study, they eliminated people with cluster B disorders, depression, anxiety. Those people were not participating.
Right.
So, again, how are they defining dysphoric with people who don't apparently have pre-existing conditions that go that direction?
Right. What if they're just sad? If these people don't have issues of depression, issues with depression and anxiety, because we all have depression and anxiety.
Sure,
it's just how you are able to, how they manifest in you.
Right.
How are they measuring that?
Okay. Again, it lacks specificity.
It lacks specificity.
Okay, go ahead.
This is the DSM.
This is the DSM.
Yeah, this is the criteria for the DSM.
Okay.
Number 3 is repetitively engaging in sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors in response to stressful life events.
But people do that, and when people have stressful life events, they go to the movies too.
Yep.
Why is going to the movies okay when you're having a stressful event in your life, but thinking about sex or masturbating is not okay?
Right.
Oh.
Or drinking. You could have a drink, go to a bar and have a drink. That's not alcohol abuse. And you may do it. You may do it repeatedly. You may go to the bar what's repeatedly?
What's repeatedly?
Right. So, it's very vague and ambiguous. Okay. So then
because I want to make sure I spell this out, that people who have, whether it's alcoholism or depression or whatever, if you're using the alcohol example, those people are not in this study.
Right. Those people are not in this study.
Okay.
That would be comorbidity. That would be alcoholism.
Yes.
Along with hypersexuality
disorder.
Right.
Okay.
So then you have 4 would be repetitive but unsuccessful efforts to control or significantly reduce these sexual fantasies and urges and behavior.
Okay. Now, on its face, that seems pretty legit.
Right.
But
on its face.
But then the next question that I would ask is, well, okay, if you are trying to reduce this behavior or these thoughts, why? Because to me, I hear shame,
right,
and potentially like religious indoctrination. Like, why are you trying to reduce those thoughts?
Right. Religiosity was not a factor. So religiosity is like how important faith is to you, or like, or
faithfulness.
Faithfulness, right?
Okay.
It wasn't a factor.
And that's a big. That leaves a huge gap.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can impact every single one of these answers.
Every single one of those answers.
Yeah, including, say, number 5 is repetitively engaging in sexual behavior while discarding the risk of physical or emotional harm to self or others. So this also can be used for a lot of, it's not just like sex. It can be used for masturbation, pornography, even sexual behavior with consenting adults, cybersex, telephone sex, strip clubs. Like this can be used for all those things. So hypersexuality falls, and this all fits under this hypersexuality bubble.
Okay.
And
because I'm prepared to give some credence to that criteria. It's still subjective, but well, okay, that comes later where we start talking about compulsivity. We'll get to that.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And this just goes on and on. There's a couple more criteria. There's Part B. There's a clinically significant personal distress and impairment of social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning associated with the frequency and intensity of the sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors. Okay. That I get.
That I get, yeah. Yeah,
right.
If you're
so this
at work
is impacting this
and
thing.
you're spending 4 hours watching porn and you get busted by your boss,
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Right.
Okay.
C, the sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors are not due to a direct physiological effect of exotic... I always mispronounce this word. Basically, substances, drugs.
Okay.
Not...
okay, so it's not... You're not being influenced by substances.
Substances, okay. Right.
Which alcohol can affect, cocaine can affect, yeah.
Exogenous.
Exogenous.
Is that what it is?
Is that... Okay.
Yeah, so. Or, co-occurring general medical condition or a manic episode. Okay. So that doesn't fit, right?
Okay.
So, and then lastly, the person is at least 18 years of age.
Okay.
Right. So these are adults, I guess.
Adults, yeah.
All right. So we have this criteria for hypersexuality disorder. This idea that, that is very nebulous, is very,
At
vague.
least the first criteria.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's incredibly undefined.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the criteria. Like you have this, especially this excessive time.
Yeah.
Really, this could be anything. You could have two different people doing the exact same behavior. And one person sees it as hypersexual disorder.
And one doesn't.
They have a problem with it.
Yeah.
It's causing these problems.
Right.
And this person, it doesn't.
Right.
And so I struggle with this notion that this is somehow genetic. Which is what the study is getting at. That there is a component or a means that epigenetics will impact the likelihood of this being a sexual like your genes will trigger, or these epigenetics will trigger hypersexuality disorder.
Okay. Now, when you and I were prepping for this, I had a huge problem with that, but we'll get there. Okay? Because the one of the things that I started taking real issue with was, okay, so you have this criteria in the DSM. And then you have these assessment tools that they used to determine who was going to participate.
Right.
Okay. Which, as we'll see, are just as undefined or unspecific.
Yes.
Okay. So what's one of the assessment tools that you
So
have?
the one I looked up, the one I have, just a second, I need to find my notes here, is I looked up the hypersexual disorder screening inventory. So these are the questions that get asked of someone who feels they have this problem. And most of the time, I would imagine that someone does not go into a mental health facility and say, I have hypersexuality disorder or hypersexual disorder. Like it's something you're diagnosed with, because maybe you have these, I have these thoughts, or I can't stop, having sex with prostitutes, or something
your
like
partner's like you're hypersexual, you want to have sex too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the assessments is they'll do this inventory. The first, they'll figure out what it is. Is it masturbation? Is it pornography? Is it, sex with consenting adults? What is it? And then they ask them, again, these Likert questions, 0 to 5, 0 being never true, 5 or 4 being almost always true. Like the first question is, during the past 6 months, have you spent a great amount of time consuming or consumed by sexual fantasies and urges, as well as planning for and engaging in sexual behavior? What is a great amount of time?
Well, and how is the person defining consumed?
Yeah. Great, yeah.
Are you sitting at home in your chair masturbating frantically for hours on end?
Or you're masturbating to fall asleep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wait, what does consumed mean?
Right.
Because again, if we come back to environment, and upbringing, and religiosity, well, all of those could play a factor in how you define what consumed is.
Right. I mean, even the person who say masturbates every night before they go to bed to help them fall asleep.
Okay.
Same two people do that.
Yes.
One person,
right.
It's awesome. I do it. I pass right out.
It's sexual health maintenance.
Right. The other person does it, passes right out, wakes up in the morning.
And has shame.
And has shame. I have a problem.
Yep.
I masturbate to fall asleep.
Right.
I masturbate because I'm bored. You know, like it's so subjective and so impacted by, like you were saying, our social networks, our cultural networks.
Right.
Like
our familial networks.
All these things, these social aspects.
Right.
Again, this is morality. This is not genetics.
But it sounds like science.
It sounds like science, right?
Yeah.
And
it's gotten more convoluted in the scientific language.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, so I'm going to jump back to the press article. You mentioned alcohol dependent.
Yeah.
In the journal article, the academic article, it's alcohol dependence, not dependent.
Right.
So that's a difference in the two. And what they're saying is that, again, they're connecting, they're showing that people who identify as having alcohol dependence or being having alcohol dependence, which, again, is self-identified through another scale, the KMSK scale.
Right.
So it's an inventory.
Right, but again, we want to make sure we add this, is they said people with substance abuse disorders,
right,
depression, anxiety disorders were eliminated from the study.
Right. So these people weren't in the study necessarily. They used that as a model.
Okay.
That of the idea of similar compulsions.
Okay.
Or compulsivity.
Okay.
Right? But still, it's subjective. If you have a drink and you're fine,
right, versus
you have a drink
and you
freak out about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, this just goes on. And of course, this is all this hypersexuality inventory is all based on 6 months. Part 2 of A is and during the last 6 months, I have used sexual fantasies and sexual behavior to cope with difficult feelings. Worry, sadness, boredom, frustration, guilt, shame. Yeah. I mean, arguably, you could use sexual behavior because you feel guilty and then not feel guilty afterwards.
Right.
A
subjectivity.
Yeah, it's very subjective. And this is really the issue. And this is where it comes down to this idea. And we can go on and on.
Right.
It's basically critiquing this, I'm sure, tried and true, proven tool that's in psychology that no one is, I don't feel enough psychologists are dissecting things like this.
Right.
They're not examining. They're not like, why is this a thing?
Right. And so my argument, okay. So I want to legitimize this study in one way, okay? What I think they're finding might have genetic links is compulsivity. Okay? Compulsivity, not hypersexuality.
Right.
Okay? And this is the argument that I make over and over again with people is especially the sex addiction, the pro-sex addiction folks. Compulsivity can manifest itself in a number of ways. In overeating, in sex, in pornography use, in exercise. There are countless ways in which compulsivity can manifest itself. Is it worthwhile to look for genetic links or genetic origins for compulsivity? I think so, because you might be able to reduce the suffering of people who are having a problem. Okay? But to say we might have found the genetic link to
being a slut
is irresponsible.
Yeah.
It's irresponsible. And these folks, these people, these epigeneticists, etc., et al., that did this, the foundation of their study is faulty.
Right.
Based on the assessment tools that they used to begin with.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have a problem with geneticists looking for root causes of compulsivity, but I think they gave too much credence to the assessment tools at its origins.
I agree.
That they used.
Yeah. Without doing enough interdisciplinary communication.
Or critical thinking about the assessment tools to be themselves.
Like, are we really looking at what we're looking at?
Exactly.
You know, I was actually having this conversation with a colleague, and it's, we make the joke that no one has asked a sociologist. You see this over and over again. And I don't mean to come down on psychology, but psychology is the iPhone, and I feel like sociology is the Android. Psychology loves to come out with, we have this new tool, this new understanding. Mm-hmm. And like sociology is like, yeah, we did that like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Like we don't make tools to make assessments, but we do the research. And a lot of it has been done that there's just not enough interdisciplinary communication, just as what you're saying, to dig deep into that.
Well, and the other thing that you pointed out, and you and I had actually similar tracks, educational tracks, where we both started at psychology and then branched out. You went to sociology, I went to sexology, and one of the issues that we agree on, actually, despite the different disciplines, is that psychology focuses a lot on sickness. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the same argument, we've made the same argument about religion. They focus on sin, and I can't speak for sociology. I'm not a sociologist, but in sexology, we reject both. We reject sickness and sin. Now, does that mean a sexologist is going to give license to someone that's harming themselves or others? Of course not. No. Okay. But where sexology comes from, at least, is what are people doing sexually? How do they feel about it? And if there's a problem, how can we manage that? Right. Okay. So we take the shame and the stigma out from the very beginning, and that seems to be where psychology starts from. Mm-hmm. Is, well, let's see how sick you are. Right.
So you were talking about that these epigenetics found a genetic link to compulsion. I would argue that they found a genetic link to shame. Like, that's really what they found. Because No, I didn't say that they found a link to compulsion. That they're attempting to. That's what they should focus on. That's what you should focus on. Look for a genetic link to compulsion, which shouldn't have, or at least, I struggle with the idea of how do you shame compulsion, because people can really suffer from compulsion. Sure. Okay, and they don't have. It doesn't have to be around sex. It can be. Yeah, I don't want to downplay that at all. Minimize that at all. Right, But yeah, no, I agree with you that what they found in this one, because that's where they started from, is a genetic link to shame. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. People's own personal hang-ups or no, I wouldn't call it hang-ups, because there are people. I will say that there are people who do suffer from these things. I don't want to minimize that. Of course. Right. But it's the structure that we're taking apart. Right. It's the structure that we're taking apart, and that they didn't find this, elusive slut gene. They found the shame gene. Yeah. Because it's people who feel bad or who have an issue with this idea of their sexual behavior that volunteered. Because, again, someone with the same behavior may not feel bad about it, therefore they don't feel like they have a problem. Right. So we've kind of hit this, right? We've dug into explaining our issue with this study. Yes. Yeah. So what kind of closing thoughts do you have on this? Well, I don't want to discount the effort of epigeneticists. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Because people really are suffering, and if we can find, there's all kinds of ethics questions that go with this, but if we can find genetic links to not just like physical illnesses, but mental disorders or mental illnesses or whatever, and relieve the suffering of people, I think that's important work to continue to do. Right. And I think in our critique, hopefully we're not going after the epigeneticists. No. We're going, I don't want to say they were duped, and I don't want to say that the psychologists that were on this, and the people that brought this tool,
right,
they were not like bad people or anything like that. I don't want to shame them for bringing it, because they're just operating within their field.
Right.
The critique is that from an outside perspective, from a cross-field examination, this tool seems really subjective.
Yes.
And a little moralistic.
And has the potential to cause harm.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, because then you have people going into these genetic studies already believing that they have such a severe problem that they need to be studied genetically.
Right.
Okay.
It's also problematic, something you were talking about, as far as taking press journals, journalists, taking this information
that they might not be well versed in,
right, and running with it, and again spouting clickbait that this is not what this study says. Or doing some due diligence and saying, you know what, maybe I won't post on that because this seems a little flimsy. Like,
it seems like that the study authors could have done a better job in critically thinking about the assessment tools had they been able to.
Right.
And that the journalist did the same and actually tried to interpret the study adequately. Yeah. Even just adequately.
And I feel like you see this time and time again with, bad journalism promoting these studies that they don't know actually how to read them, first off, and then promoting these statistics and things like that are just inaccurate. Well, I see this a lot in my study, in my research on hooking up and hooking up culture. Time and time again, you see it in Vogue and places like that, and even in Maxim, hooking up's bad for you. How many people have you hooked up with, and blah blah. Like the threshold number of and promiscuity and shit like that.
We have a little bit of a different problem in sexology where we have. People like to fluff pieces. How to please your lover 101.
Right.
Right. And sexology really struggles to be taken seriously. And this is what sexology, and I think even sociology, and psychology too, it should, is to critically think about the work we're doing.
Right.
Okay. Instead of just going, here's this diagnostic tool, it's been handed down to us for the last several decades, so we're just going to keep running with it, right? And the thing is that when you have journalists that are doing headlines like this gives fuel to the thing that we were talking about last time, which is these public health crises, laws, and the people that read the science the least are our politicians.
Yes.
Unless they have a history in science, which most don't.
Right.
They get the snippets.
Or they get a filtered snippet.
A filtered snippet.
Yeah.
That suits their worldview.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So
what
we don't
advice?
Have a critique epigeneticists, you're doing good work.
Yeah.
Just try to think more critically especially when you're going into the field of sexuality.
Yeah. And if you're examining something that has a cultural component to it, maybe talk to someone who studies culture and society.
Yep.
Like, I know, yes, there is social psychology, there's cultural psychology. Like, talk to them maybe, or talk to a sociologist or an anthropologist or something like that to get a different perspective on this, rather than just jumping in to find a tool that will work for what you're examining.
And you know what? And you raise a really good point with that. Really, folks like these epigeneticists should think critically about the assessment tools they're using, similar to people who go to other countries and assess a culture and its inner workings from a Western model.
Right.
Okay. That kind of critical thinking should be in play similarly in when people are doing sexuality assessments and studies, because of how loaded with shame and morality sexuality is in the sciences.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
And one other thing, I think clinicians, when studies like this come out, or when they use these models, to be kind of conscientious that you might be creating more harm than good. Maybe it's just that talk to this person. Maybe it's just their upbringing,
Right.
their behavior. They think their behavior is bad,
Right.
And it's like, we met up with Dr. David Lay, and,
Yeah.
we both agree that like, if you think something is bad for you, it's going to be bad for you.
It's going to be bad for you.
Behavior wise. Like,
Right.
if you think it's bad, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So, maybe help them figure out why they think it's bad,
Right.
rather than throwing assessments like this to find if they fit this mold.
Right.
Maybe they just have a high religiosity,
Yep.
and you can kind of work through that.
No, and you have to think about the implications here, that if you, let's say, scientists miraculously come up with, we've targeted a gene for hypersexuality and we can give you medicine for it.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's wrong with that person is they grew up in a religious fundamental household where anything other than procreation was bad.
Right.
And you're sick if you like that.
Well, I mean, you hear about Catholic guilt all the time.
Yeah.
This idea of having premarital sex just destroys them. People sometimes they feel
you
terrible
could
about themselves.
boil it down to like people who are LGBT.
Yeah.
One of the classic messages, at least in Christianity, I don't know about other religions, but is we love the sinner but hate the sin.
Right.
What? What?
Yeah.
Like the kind of damage that can do. Now imagine that person is like, we have a pill so you won't be gay anymore. Then we get into a medicalized version of conversion therapy.
Yeah.
Conversion therapy in a pill when there's nothing wrong with that person. Begin with same with this.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Let's start getting on our soapbox here.
Yeah, we are. We should probably step down.
Yeah.
It's getting late.
Right. So good news. We are back on YouTube.
We're back on YouTube.
Right.
Shh, don't tell YouTube.
Don't tell YouTube. We just have to search for Sex Nerd.
Sex Nerd Podcast.
Sex Nerd. I'm sorry. That's right. So it's on YouTube. We're Sex Nerd Podcast.
Yep.
Right.
And you're probably watching this on YouTube.
Right.
Hopefully. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you know what to do, right? The whole
like, subscribe
button.
Yeah.
Leave a comment if you want.
Leave a comment if you want. Yeah. And I mean, seriously, we have no problem with being critiqued, or if you have something additional to add, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. If you're an epigeneticist and we botched the shit out of this, let us know.
Let us know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're don't want to be those ignorant men talking about things that we don't really know about.
Right. And we definitely, I keep coming back to this. I just watched a podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he talked about how to be a good science communicator. Mm-hmm. Journalists have their place. From my perspective, they have their place in reporting what's important, especially when it comes to holding governments accountable. Journalists, talk to more scientists, please. And scientists, get better at being science communicators.
Right.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is a great example.
Yeah. Learn how to communicate, period.
Learn how to communicate.
Yeah. All right. So again, like us on YouTube.
So I'm going to put it in the links below.
Yeah.
Or in the So we have our Vimeo channel, which is Sex Nerd. Mm-hmm. We did rebrand our Instagram. That's Sex Nerd Pod.
Sex Nerd Pod.
Right.
So that's at Sex Nerd Pod in Instagram, right?
It's yes.
Yeah.
Sex Nerd Pod on Instagram. Of course, we still have our Vimeo channel, which is Sex Nerd, and we're still working on our Twitter.
We are working on our
Twitter.
But
you have your own Twitter?
But I have my own Twitter, at Joshua Corum.
Right, and I'm at Dr. Victoria.
Yeah, mine's pretty simple.
Yep, and and then we have a Facebook.
And we have Facebook. That's right.
Oh, you have a Facebook.
Well, I do have a Facebook, but we have a Facebook.
What's that?
Sex Nerd Podcast.
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. So you can go and like us there, see links. Mm-hmm. It's not very active right now,
yet,
but we're just, it's in its infancy.
Yes. Yeah.
So there'll be more to come.
So thanks again for tuning in.
Yeah.
And do we have a topic picked for next time?
Not yet.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Yeah. It might be more of that desexualization stuff.
Okay.
I'm kind of on that kick of the desexualization of sexual minorities and groups for the purposes of legitimation.
That
normalizing.
Hey, that sounds like a great topic.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to probably do that then.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.